welcome to the New Jersey Morning Show. I'm Cara DeFalco.
And I'm Mike Favetta. Ali Prato is a journalist and the creator of the #1 infertility podcast, Infertile AF podcast. She's also co-founded the infertility community, Fertility Rally, and has recently written a children's book about IVF called Work of Art.
Here to tell us all about her new book is Ali Prato. Good morning, Ali.
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me.
From one IVF warrior to another, I'm very happy to have you on today.
Wow. I have to get you on the podcast.
I know. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your IVF story, which is chronicled in the new book?
Definitely. So I am a secondary infertility warrior. I had my daughter with no assisted reproductive technology, and then I had 4 losses after that trying to have our second child. I didn't know anything about fertility at the time. I didn't know anything about my fertility. It's funny how little like sex education, we got growing up and, not knowing much about it. So I ended up going through IVF to have my son. And I got very, very lucky that just one round of IVF, I did end up having him. So that's the odds of that are really rare. The odds of it happening on the first go round, I know now, but I didn't know that at the time.
Wow. So Ali, you mentioned that there was a history here, kind of a long process, but why did you feel like now was a good time to write this book?
Yeah. So while I was going through it, I felt very alone. My son now is 8. So this was a little while ago, and, Instagram wasn't as big as it is now. Podcasts weren't as big as they are now. There wasn't a lot of community. There weren't a lot of people talking about this. Even celebrities and stuff were pretty hush hush about going through IVF or using surrogates, things like that. So I vowed after I did have my son that I would try to make it easier for the women who were coming behind me and the men. And so that's why I started my podcast, Infertile AF, in 2019, which tells a different person's story every single week about family building through assisted reproductive technology. That's why I started Fertility Rally, co-founded it with another woman in 2020, which is a community where we meet virtually. We have a lot of support groups and a lot of events, and it's basically just a group of people who get it, who are all going through different family building journeys. And then that's why I wrote the book, was because I want to keep normalizing these conversations. I think it's okay to talk about this stuff. And I've always been open with my son about the way that he was born. So that's why I wrote the book, Work of Art, because it's me basically telling him his story and how he was so wanted and how we fought so hard to have him. And, to make him feel special and know that he's just as loved as anybody who was born in a different way.
I love that. And I think that's something that, parents, maybe struggle with or even in explaining, not only to their own children, but about other children. So how did you come up kind of with like the frame of the story? Like what makes it a children's story? How do you present this to him and other kids?
So I came up with the title first, Work of Art. So art, it stands for assisted reproductive technology. So I always had that title in the back of my head. And then one day I sat down and thought, I should just tell this story. So I just kind of, I have a journalism background and I've always been a writer and a storyteller. So I just decided to kind of write the story of how I did tell Sonny, my son, how he was born. And it just kind of poured out of me. And basically, it's a touching point. It's a starting point for parents. We don't get into the super duper nitty gritty science of it all because it can be very complicated, but we do talk about how he was wanted very badly and how I loved, being a mother to my daughter ever so much that I wanted a second kid so badly. And, we talk about how he was born in a lab, and in the book he said, it's like a superhero. And I said, yeah, kind of like a superhero. So, we again, just want to really normalize the conversation and get people talking. And, I think it's okay to talk about this stuff. And the book is kind of, you can read it to your kids if you have kids born through ART, and then you can kind of delve into it as deeply as you want to after the book. So I think it's just a way to open that door and, just get people comfortable with the topic.
What would be some advice that you would have for people who want to talk to their children about IVF, building modern families? If the book is one good way to open that door, is it something that you think, I guess obviously you do, that children need to be told about how they were conceived?
I think to each his own, for sure. Every family is different. Every journey is different. I think it's definitely should be up to the family themselves, what's best for them. I would never say point blank, everybody needs to talk about this if they don't feel comfortable. I have a lot of friends who've had kids through IVF that haven't told them, and that's their choice. And I totally respect that. But for me, I've always been a pretty open book, and he hears me, both my kids hear me doing my podcast in the living room and having my fertility rally meetings and events and things. So this has always just been very normal around our house. So I would say, obviously do what's right for you. And if you feel like it's something you want to, share with your children, wait until it feels like a good moment, and then kind of, go into it as deeply as you want to. And, again, the book is kind of a way to open that door. And then if you want to take it, a few steps further after that, you can.
Allie, earlier you mentioned about the topic of IVF almost being hush hush, especially, in the public sense. But now you have your podcast, Fertility Rally, and your resources. So what are some other resources that you've created for people who are going through infertility and want to talk about it?
Yeah, so the podcast is a good thing because you can, there's been 262 episodes so far, so there's kind of something for everybody. If people want to listen to that, it's available for free on all the podcast, networks, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and that's called Infertile AF. So they can just look it up. And I've talked to celebrities, I've talked to people next door. It's kind of the whole vibe is just being really diverse and trying to cover as much as I can, because I want every single person out there to feel not alone and to find somebody that they can relate to. So there's that. And then Fertility Rally, we have a website called fertilityrally.com. If people want to check it out and join one of our virtual support groups, they're more than welcome to try one and see if it's their jam. That's out there too. And then, again, the book, which is at infertileafgroup.com if people want to check it out there. And I'm also always available. I'm very active on Instagram. The whole Instagram community is great. We call Fertility Rally the worst club with the best members because nobody wants to be in this group, but everybody that's in it is really willing to help each other out. So, I would say if you're in this journey and you're looking for resources, you can always go on Instagram. You can search hashtags. There's a hashtag called TTC, which is trying to conceive, and tons of resources will come up and tons of accounts. You can DM me, you can DM so many other people in this community to talk about things, to ask questions. Everybody is really, really willing to make it easier for everybody else, because it's such a terrible place to be when you're in this infertility journey. And, to have people around and have that community just makes it so much better.
It does, Allie, for sure. I think just, for anybody dealing with something like this, to just not feel like you're on an island is probably critical. One more time, Allie, where can folks go to find the book and more?
Thank you so much. Can I hold it up? I have it in my lap. So this is the book. It's called Work of Art. An IVF Kid Learns About Assisted Reproductive Technology. You can find it on my website at infertileafgroup.com. And then fertilityrally.com is our community. We're on Instagram at both those names as well. And then you can listen to the podcast Infertile AF anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So I hope people reach out. If you're going through something, please know you're not alone. I really just want to help people and reach as many people as possible, because when I was going through it, I was just so devastated, and I never want anybody to feel that way.
Absolutely. Allie Prato, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
I love that. She's, I've talked about it here a little bit. It's something that I've gone through, am going through, and it does help to have that community of people around you. I think when you're going through anything that's difficult, right?
Sure, and to normalize it, to not be afraid to talk about it. And I think social media, as terrible as we may speak of it, as awful as it can be, with promoting anxiety and depression, all those terrible things, it does foster a sense of community. So there are some positives, especially in cases like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes a big, big difference. So hopefully if anybody's dealing with that, definitely go check out Allie and her book and her podcast and all that good stuff. You're not alone.
Absolutely. All the links right here on our website, ONNJ, because On New Jersey is always on. Find us on our website, Roku TV or Fire TV.